After completing his PhD degree from CDRI Lucknow, Dr. Chabra joined University of Connecticut Health Center, Farmington, as a postdoctoral fellow. Dr. Chabra served as an assistant professor of medicine in the Department of Medicine until 2017 and in the Stem Cell Institute from 2010 to 2017 at the UCHC. In June 2018, Dr. Chabra joined Amity University, Haryana as professor and director of the Stem Cell Institute. He has cross-disciplinary research expertise in the fields of human cancer, immunology and immunotherapy, human pluripotent stem cell research, molecular microbiology, and nanotechnology. Dr. Chabra has published more than 30 manuscripts in prominent international peer-reviewed journals. His research work has been widely cited and has earned him awards and accolades at international platforms, including Overseas Fellow of Royal Society of Medicine membership. Dr. Chabra also serves as an editor or on editorial board member for several prominent research journals, including Scientific Reports, Oncotargets and Therapy, and Stem Cell Discovery Journal. In addition, he also serves as a peer reviewer for several reputed international research journals, including Journal of Immunology, Journal of Leukocyte Biology, Vaccine, and Expert Opinion on Therapeutic Targets. With this, Professor Dr. Arvind Chabra, we are pleased to have you here today, and the mic is over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khurana, for your kind introduction. So the topic that I've been given is to talk about career perspectives in biotechnology and human health. So basically, since it's a mix of the students at a different level, so I have divided it into two parts. One is what is biotechnology and human health. And within that, the next part is what are the career perspectives. So within the biotechnology and human health, although the biotechnology, as the previous speaker has already talked about, this is a very wide area. It hails from enzymes to plants to microbes to human vaccines. So you name it, we have included it in the biotechnology, our biotechnology applications are there in that particular area. So I'll be talking about specifically two aspects. One is molecular medicine and another is stem cell-based regenerative medicine. So since students are starting the phase itself, so I'm not going to dwell into too much into the data. I'll be giving a brief overview, and then we will be talking about the career prospects. And within the career prospects, we'll be talking about traditional career routes and what are the emerging career options that students might consider. Some students are into hardcore research, so traditional career routes suits them more. Some students who are not into hardcore research inclination, so there are lots of opportunities that are coming up recently. Students can just plan it out. How do they want to venture into this field, and how do they plan their successful career? So that's the basic overall objective that I plan to have it during this course of half an hour, 45 minutes. So what is the molecular medicine? This molecular medicine, as I think students don't need an introduction now. In this particular area, we are concerned, or we want to understand the intricacies of the disease development process, how a particular disease develops. We are living in the world of COVID pandemic. So, I think everybody is aware, how fast the landscape of diagnostics is changing, how fast the landscape of disease manifestation, exploratory mechanism is changing, resulting into therapeutic modality development and all those things. So one of the key aspects or underlying feature of treating a particular disease is how the disease is developing. And then how do you diagnose that particular disease? So the next part is development of effective diagnostic tools and technologies for an early diagnosis. Earlier, whether a particular individual So and then the next thing is like if you want to treat it, so you have to have effective therapeutic modalities to treat these diseases. So in all these aspects, there are opportunities, and there are companies which are working in more than one area, or specifically in one area or another. So that's a very wide means career perspective that you can think of. Like there are multiple companies working in these different facets. So I've taken an example of cancer, how the cancer develops and all those things. So basically, like if we are talking about any infectious disease, so that happens like when our own means body gets attacked by foreign pathogens. For example, like viruses, bacteria, and foreign intruder can be detected by our immune cells, and they will fight it off. And if we are not able to fight it off, we will devise strategies of vaccines, as we are, as I mentioned, like in the case of COVID and all those things. But in the case of cancer, like some of our own cells, they get transformed during the course of development, or due to genetic mutations like that are inherent to that individual. So there are childhood cancer, there are age-related cancers. Mostly it is considered as an age-related disease, but there are childhood cancers also in there. So all these different diseases, which are cumulatively known as cancer, they have some basic features that they share. The cells are going to be transformed into cancerous cells, and they will lose control on their cell death pathway, cell proliferation pathways, so that they can become immortal. So the checkpoints for cell death and cell proliferation, they have been lost. And these cells become immortalized. And then once they have become immortalized, they need growth factors. So that means as a solid tumor develops, like it has to develop their own blood vasculature system. So the angiogenesis has to take place, and then these microcytes of a tumor, which have origin in a one particular part of the body, they have to metastasize to different locations. So that is another key feature of this cancer disease development process, whereby tumor cells, they undergo like mesenchymal to epithelial to mesenchymal transformation, and they can move to other distant site, and they evade apoptosis and all those things. So if our immune system, like what happens like during the course of development, like why our immune system actually fails. So basically, like when a normal cell is transforming into a cancerous cells, so these cancerous cells will secrete some molecules which are inflammatory in the nature. And these inflammatory means which are shown here in the pink. So these inflammatory molecules are danger signals. They will indicate to our immune system that something has happened, and then you are required to come over here. So the immune system cells, T cells, natural killer cells, dendritic cells, macrophages, they will come over there, and then they try to fight it off as they get this inflammatory signatures. So in most of us, this is a regular phenomena, like because mutations are happening all the time, and we don't get cancer. So if these immune cells are able to fight it off well, then healthy cells are left behind. Tumor cells undergo cell death, and or they are killed, and then we don't develop tumors. But in certain cases, these tumor cells, they can remain dormant, or they can keep hiding. And then they will accumulate more mutations. And then once they reach the threshold of mutation to become a cancerous metastatic cancer, then these immune mechanism will no longer work, because this tumor microenvironment is also immunosuppressive. And so these microenvironment secretory molecules like cytokine interleukin 10, TGF beta, and these cancer cells will also express these inhibitory molecules, PD-L1, PD-1, PD-L1, and then CTLA4. So these are some of the mechanisms by which immune cells get dysfunctional. And so the tumor cells can escape, and then we get a cancer develop in our body. So what are the different treatment options that individuals have at this point? So we have surgery, which is a primary mode of treatment, like once a person gets diagnosed. And then we have chemotherapy and radiation therapy. All these therapies are non-specific. So they actually target highly dividing cells, And then so there are side effects associated with it. So there is an area of research that is developing very fast. So one of the question was whether translation therapy is working in cancer or not. So in the case of means successful stories, means immunotherapy is turning out to be a major player in recent decade or so. So there are initial approaches were vaccines, then there is an immune checkpoint therapy. So what is immune checkpoint therapy? So I will be talking about a little bit more in detail in a bit, but like there is a brake in our immune system, there is an accelerator in our immune system. We think of a car as an example of the immune system. So immune checkpoint is you remove the brake. So by means of antibodies which are going to target the inhibitory molecule. Then another approach is adaptive transfer therapy. So this approach is you take out the cells from the individual's body and then you manipulate them and then put them back into the patient. So we will be talking a little bit more in detail with some cartoons. So I'll be giving example there. So then there comes the chemotherapeutic drugs or any other drug against different disease molecules. What is the route of development and all those things. So all these drugs, whether it's a cancer, whether it's against different diseases, they follow the basic developmental schema is that you have to have in vitro studies whereby you will be doing a target identification and then validation of your target specificity, efficacy against the tumor cell lines or microbes. And then once you get in vitro studies giving you some hits, then you test the in vivo efficacy, specificity, and toxicity of those molecules in animal studies, in vivo studies, preclinical in vivo studies. Once you get a positive results out of those preclinical studies, then you move to human clinical trials. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, whereby you will be first checking the toxicity, whether it is means administrable or not, then efficacy and the specificity of that particular treatment. And that's how like every drug or a biologics moves through the developmental phase in all those things. So this is I was talking about, like what are the different approaches of T-cell based therapeutics that are available, that have been developed. So on the left-hand side are a approach which is known as cancer vaccine or active specific vaccination strategy. In this, you take, means there was an earlier speaker, Dr. Kanchan Mishra, who was talking about dendritic cell vaccine. So the dendritic cells are the best antigen presenting cells. So you take out dendritic cells from the body of the individual, and then you modify it by different routes, whether you can express the tumor antigen, you can put synthetic peptides on these dendritic cell vaccines, or as you were saying, like you just lyse the cells, tumor cells, and then you pulse these means dendritic cells with this means tumor cell lysate and all those things, and then you can put it back into the patient. But this approach means, although it was first tried with a hope that since vaccines against infectious diseases work, so we should get a good response. But the success rate was quite low. The reason being cancer cells are our own transformed cells. So since our immune system is programmed in such a way, it should not attack our own cells. So most of the highly efficient tumor reactive cells, they are not there in cancer patient's body. So that's why, and plus there is an immunosuppressive microenvironment there. So that's why like initial efforts of dendritic cell vaccines didn't work, but there are now approaches coming up as I mentioned, like this immune checkpoint strategy. So there are combinatorial approaches that are coming up to take care of those inhibitory means signals. Then on the right hand side is adaptive immunotherapy. As I was saying, like you take out the cells where you take functional immune effector cells, T cells. So these T cells, then you treat it with different regimen, lymphokine activated killer cells, which are naturally killer acquired effector cells, means some effector cells which can acquire killing ability if you culture them in high dose cytokines. So this was the first approach. Then tumors also have infiltrating lymphocytes. So you can retrieve those TILs from the tumors, and then you can use them in culture and then put them back. You can even make a clone, or nowadays you can engineer the cells. So what do we mean by that engineering? So let me go back to this slide first. So engineering means like all the T cells, whether it's a CD4 T cells, CD8 T cells, they express a particular receptor. CD8 express MSC class 1 receptor, CD4 express class 2 receptor. That's how they recognize their target. So if a cancer patient has good immune cells, so you can grow those cells in a large number, and then you take out a receptor out of that, and then you can put it on T cells of any individual, and these T cells need not be specific for tumor antigen. So since you are putting up this tumor specific receptor on them, so they acquire tumor reactivity. So this approach we developed in our published work, whereby we used melanoma epitope specific CD8 positive T cells, isolated a receptor, cloned it in a lentiviral vector, and then we engineered both CD8 and CD4 T cells. There was some help or like some features of a CD4 T cells which are required for generating a good killer CD8 positive response. So that's why we wanted to generate these. So we published quite a few papers on this and then showed that you can actually convert so as I was saying, in a natural scenario in our body, CD8 recognize the target in MSC class 1 manner, CD4 recognize in a MSC class 2 manner. We converted this class 2 restricted CD4 into functioning as class 1 restricted tumor reactive cells, so that both CD4 and CD8 can target at the same time to the tumor antigen using the same receptor. So, and this is the summary of the work that we have published in a few papers, whereby these engineered CD4 T cells, they acquired cytolytic function of their own. Naturally, CD4 cells provide help, but they don't kill directly. But we could convert them to become killer cells. And then they also provided help to these CD8 T cells to grow in large number and live a longer life. So they were providing both help and then killer function. And then a new approach has come up whereby since T cells recognize the antigen by receptors, so and antibodies are also good tools to target different molecules. So a approach known as chimeric antigen receptor or CAR has come in, whereby you use a antigen recognition domain of antibody and couple it with the T cell receptor signaling domain of TCR. And then you make a chimeric or hybrid receptor. And then that can be targeted against different tumor antigens. And it has generated good success against B-cell malignancies. And this is being now extended to solid tumors also. So essentially B-cell recognizing CAR was developed, and then B-cell lymphoma has been treated with the success, and FDA has also approved this therapy. The approach, whether it's a TCR or whether it's a CAR, so you make your construct in a vector, which could be virus, which could be non-viral vector. You take out patient's own lymphocytes and then engineer these cells with your receptor of your choice, targeting a specific tumor antigen, and then grow these cells in large numbers and transfer it back into the patient. And these cells will then target those tumor cells. So now the stem cell based therapy. So what is the stem cells, and what are the stem cell based therapeutics approaches that are ongoing? So the field of stem cell regenerative medicine aims to utilize adult as well as pluripotent stem cells of embryonic origin. So they are the fountain of youth, as we can say them, because our embryonic cells only developed us. So that's how all the cells of our body came in from one single source, that is the inner cell mass. And we want to use these pluripotent stem cells to replace damaged cells, tissues, organ systems of human body. So, and as you will see in a bit, they can also be used to study disease mechanisms and all those approaches so. So if you think of stem cells, some of you, since you guys are beginning, so you might think stem cell is a very hi-fi field or something like that. So let me just dampen your or rather make you more comfortable. So this is a story of you, this is a story of me, and this is a story of anybody else who's sitting over here. So part of a mother cells comes with a part of a father cells, makes a zygote, and that's how a whole individual develops. And this is we want to study in the stem cell research, that how does it happen? One single cell and developing into lung cell, liver cell, heart cells, kidney cells, without even changing the nucleotide sequence. So you can think of like how complicated this might be, but like in simplistic terms, as we have grown from fetus to 20 year, 30 year, 40, 50 years old as we are. So this is how the whole system develops effortlessly. The nature has created such a efficient mechanism that all the body parts of our body, they are working perfectly without even interfering into each other's systems or working. And this is the how this is happen. And we want to develop some approaches by which we can just replicate the natural phenomena in culture for the benefit of the mankind. Humankind, that you can generate liver specific cells or blood specific cells, and you can use it for treatment of diseases of some individuals who are not so fortunate and have developed certain diseases. And how does it happen? Like, so all these early stage embryonic cells, which are present in the inner cell mass of blastula, they form these three germ layers: ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. Ectoderm forming the skeletal system, nervous system, and then mesoderm forming the muscles and heart, some other organ systems, and our endoderm forming a gastric canal and some other organ systems. So that's how all these different organs are developing, and they are acquiring their specific special location in our body, and specific phenotype and function. At a molecular level, or rather at a cellular level, what is happening? So this inner cell mass, which is forming these embryonic stem cells, is going to divide. And this is going to divide to make its own kind. And this is also going to make tissue-specific progenitors. So this will make liver-specific progenitors, lung-specific progenitors, brain-specific progenitors. And those progenitors will then divide and then make more restricted differentiated cells. For example, in the blood, if we are talking about hematopoietic stem cells, so they will form T cells, B cells, macrophages, eosinophil, basophil, neutrophil, whatnot. So these are functionally, terminally differentiated cells, you can say of. So at a cellular level, that's how like one single population, which is pluripotent in nature at an embryonic stage, they've developed into different organ-specific functional cells. Like so. And this is the story. The whole process is known as differentiation process. So now it is possible that we can reverse the differentiation course also, but we will talk it in a bit about that, how you can achieve that and all those things. And this cellular phenomena is happening at a molecular level. And in that, what happens is like the early stage blastula, which is like means where you can form both the embryonic tissue as well as extraembryonic tissue or the placenta, that is known as totipotent stem cells. And once you go to the inner cell mass, they can form the embryonic tissue, but not the placenta. So they're known as pluripotent stem cells. And multipotent, which can form like 6 to 10 cells of origin, for example, blood different lineages. Oligopotent, they have much restricted differentiation potential, 2 to 5 different types of cells. You can think of in a liver or a lungs, which have a much lesser number of different types of cells. And the unipotent, you can think of, for example, skin cells. So means all this during the course of differentiation, this lineage specific genes gets turned on, and pluripotency specific genes gets turned off during the course of differentiation. What are the different types of, so this I've already covered, like totipotent, pluripotent, multipotent, oligopotent, and this unipotent. And in our body, as we know of, some of you might have experienced or seen somebody in your family that if you lose a nail, your nail grows back up. If you, we always get haircuts because our hairs are always growing. And if we get skin a little bit damaged, so new skin comes back up. How does it happen? Because these are the progenitor cells in different parts of our organ systems, which are there to take care of the normal wear and tear. Some of these, and these are known as adult stem cells. And in the blood, there are hematopoietic stem cells, mesenchymal stem cells, as we have heard today. So they have different sources, including bone marrow, but they can also be retrieved from this fat of our body. Then neuronal progenitor cells are there, epithelial stem cells are there for lung epithelial or means intestinal epithelial. And then you have skin stem cells also to take care of the skin development. So all these cells which are there in the specific location, that particular location is known as stem cell niche. So there are two key properties of the stem cells. One is they have to make their own kind. So that is known as self-renewal. Because if you have 1 million blood progenitors, and by the time you reach age of 50, if you do not replenish that number, they all get exhausted. No new blood cells will come up. So these progenitors in the specific locations in our body, they have to make their own kind. That is known as self-renewal. And another thing is differentiation process, means they will have to make lineage specific progenitors. So these are the two key properties of these stem cells, whether it's adult, whether it's embryonic, differentiation and this self-renewal. So this happens by asymmetric division, whereby one stem cell will differentiate into one stem cell and a progenitor cells. Or at a population level, stem cells will make many cells, and some of them will become progenitors, some of them will become these stem cells. This is shown as a cartoon over here. Red cells are stem cells. They are attached to these stromal cells or in the microenvironment, and they divide, make their own kind red cells, or they can make a differentiated somatic cells in there. So that's happened like, so it can be simple niche or a complex niche. Like, so I won't go into detail. As this field means when you think about your career or anything, you guys are want instant results like so. But when we talk about in a science perspective, how the progress is done. So in science, a decade is just a recent development, like you can think of like so. So we think about this, how the development in the stem cell field has taken place. So this field is evolving since 1962, when for the first time somatic nuclear transfer technique was approached. And this technique was then perfected in mice in 1981, 20 years later. In mammals, then it came in with the development of Dolly the sheep, 1996. And the first human line of a stem cell origin, of embryonic origin, was derived in 1998. And then this generated a lot of hope that you will be able to generate donor-specific embryonic lines, or donor matching embryonic lines. But then it also resulted in a controversy, like you are going to destroy the embryo. So a technology was developed in 2006, whereby you can convert adult cells into pluripotent stem cells. And since you are inducing these cells, so they were named as iPSC, or induced pluripotent stem cells. And the same approach was developed in human, or shown in a human, in 2007 by Shinya Yamanaka, who did it in this mouse and human iPSC. And as Dr. Sharma initially mentioned, like first human ESC line was derived by J.A. Thompson's group in there. So this is a somatic cell nuclear transfer approach, whereby you take somatic cell nucleus of an adult developer somatic cells and then put it in a enucleated egg, and then trigger the division, and then you can generate stem cell line which are of donor specific. Then in the case of human embryonic stem cell line, you take a donated embryo in the IVF clinic, and then you can make use of them to isolate inner cell mass cells to generate these human embryonic stem cell lines. Now this is the iPSC technology, whereby you just take a somatic cell, and then you express a set of genes into these cells, and then you can convert these normal cells into pluripotent in the nature. What are the genes? So in the Yamanaka factors, there are OP3/4, SOX2, KLF4, CMYC. And when he published in a human system in 2007, along the same time, Thompson also published, and there was a small variation in there, like instead of KLF4, he used NANOG in there. So these are some of the genes which can convert a normal developed differentiated cells into pluripotent stem cells, and there are different ways by which you can deliver them, using retrol, entry, or different viral vectors. Some of them are gets integrated into the genome, some of them don't get integrated in the genome. So these are the intricacies like that I don't think I want to go over here much in detail, but your job is to deliver, and that's how you make it. So I'll give you an example how we created some of the iPSCs. So this is means you take blood derived cells, means you take I can take your blood cells and then isolate some cells of our choice and then put these reprogramming factor. So this is the cursor where my cursor is. So we used dendritic cells, and then from those dendritic cells we derived these iPSC clone. So this was a initial clone, and then this is a established line. So this is just to show you example that indeed it is possible to generate these iPSC lines which are donor specific. Now how to characterize them? So we have become familiar with different technologies in the previous talks: RT-PCR, antibody-based approaches, FACS, immunofluorescence, ELISA. So these are some of the common techniques that are used for characterization of these stem cells by targeting different biomarker expression. I will see like in a bit. So then another thing is you have to test their karyotype also, whether their genome is stable or not. And then whether their differentiation potential is also there or not. So that is a teratoma analysis that is done. So these are some of the examples like RT-PCR, that's how it looks. So you can target pluripotency associated gene expression. And then if antibodies are used, so you can use it by FACS, whereby you tag this antibody with a fluorochrome, and then you can means detect positive cells by means of this FACS machine, or you can look under the microscope. In the D, this is a microscopy means slide, and then in the G is the karyotype. So karyotype is the chromosomal analysis of cells. So basic purpose being that during the course of iPSC differentiation or development, whether there is a chromosomal abnormality in these iPSCs or not. So you have to confirm that. So there are different staining techniques by which we confirm this. So we derived 3 iPSC lines, and as a positive control, we tested with the H9 HESC. So there was no genetic abnormality in there. So karyotype, as I said, like this is a chromosomal status of your cells. So there is a normal karyotype. We have 46 chromosome or 23 pairs. And in the left hand side is a normal karyotype. In the right hand side, this shows a cancerous cells karyotype, whereby some chromosomal translocations have happened, some additional chromosomes are there. So if there is abnormality, that's how it will look like. Now, how do you test the differentiation potential? So as we were discussing, like if we at the blastula stage, inner cell mass cells have to form the 3 germ layers. So how do you test it with the iPSC? So you can culture them in a dish whereby they cannot adhere to the cell surface. So if they cannot adhere, they make spherical bodies, which are known as embroid bodies. And these embroid bodies have capability to form all the 3 germ layers. And then you look for these biomarkers, ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm biomarkers, which is shown CUR, NFH, and MSX C15 is a mesoderm, HNF is a endoderm biomarker. And then you can also detect by another technique, which is a teratoma, as I was talking about. So at the bottom is the teratoma analysis. I'll be discussing that bit in the next slide. So this is what it is like. How do you test the teratoma analysis? So you inject it in a mice animal which does not have the intact immune system. If it doesn't have an intact immune system, then it will not attack those cells. Otherwise, it will attack and kill them. So these cells are implanted, a tumor develops, and then you look for these ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm specific structures. On the left-hand side is a published work from another research group. On the right-hand side is our own iPSC, this teratoma generated from the own iPSC. Now, the next thing like which some groups use for characterizing these iPSC is lineage complementation. What it is, since they are pluripotent in the nature, so they can essentially form the whole individual organism. So cells from a white background mice animal, pluripotent stem cells, if they are put in a black mouse embryo, then they will do some lineage complementation, or they will form some structures of that. So that's how like the pluripotency of these iPSCs is tested, or their developmental potential is tested. So this is at a cellular level. What is happening at a molecular level? So at a molecular level, everything is a gene, at a gene expression. So when stem cells are a pluripotent state, so pluripotency associated genes are on. Lineage specific genes or blood specific genes, liver, brain, all those genes are turned off. But when the differentiation is taking place, these lineage-specific genes will turn on and pluripotency-associated genes will turn off. How is it achieved? So this is achieved by secondary modification of the DNA. As I was saying, a cell is developing into different lineages. Nucleotide sequence is not changing, but the expression of genes is changing in different lineages. So this happened by secondary modification of these DNAs and bound histones with that particular DNA. And this is known as epigenetics. And profile of a particular cell of epigenetic marking is known as epigenetic profile. So histones get methylated and acetylated, and DNA gets methylated. So DNA methylation is usually a stop signal, means that gene will not be expressed. And histone acetylation is always a turn-on signal, means that gene will be expressed. And methylation at a histone varies where it happens, that determines whether the gene will be turned on or not. So, and there are specific enzymes which are dedicated with this, writing the code of epigenetics in our different body cells. And basically, like if a cell is replicating, for example, a T cell is dividing into more T cells, then that epigenetic profile has to be just photocopied. And this particular photocopying is done by this enzyme known as DNA methyltransferase 1, DNMT1. So the exactly replica of the epigenetic profile has to be created. But if a hematopoietic stem cell is developing into T cells, in the B cells, so a new code has to be written of these epigenetics. So this is done by this enzyme known as DNA methyltransferase 3. So de novo methylation happened by DNMT3, and copying of the same this epigenetic profile is done by DNMT1. And what happens, like what it does? So if a DNA is not methylated, then transcription machinery will bind and then faithfully transcribe that particular DNA. But if this DNA has methylated, then the roadblock has been created, so the machinery cannot move further, and that transcription will not happen. So this is what happens, how the gene expression means is controlled. And its significance is shown in this slide. One single means this hematopoietic stem cells form all these different parts of different types of blood cells. All these cells have same nucleotide sequence, but they have different morphological features. They have different function in our body, and they have their means, and this is done by different epigenetic profile. And that's how all our cells develop without changing the primary sequence of the DNA. Now, therapeutic applications like so. We have seen some applications of adult stem cells, but they are coming up potential of this pluripotent stem cells. And so essentially you can create iPSC lines, individual specific, and then they can be used for drug screening purpose, or they can use for cell replacement therapeutic purpose. And one of the example is this sickle cell anemia, which is caused by in which the normal RBCs, they become sickle-like. And then once they become sickle-like, they can just bind to each other, clog the whole bloodstream, and then patient's life can be threatened. And this all happens by just one single point mutation. And this point mutation, T2A, results in this glutamic acid converted to valine. And so basically, like if you can convert this valine to again glutamic acid by correcting this point mutation in the hematopoietic stem cells, then you can treat this disease. And this is the approach. You generate iPSC lines, generate HSCs, hematopoietic stem cells, and then you can gene correct it, and then you can generate a functional stem cell lines. And then as I was talking about, we don't need to dwell into it again, but like if you generate donor-specific stem cell lines, iPSCs, you can generate these dendritic cells or T cells, individual specific, and use it for cancer vaccine development or adaptive therapy. So this is the protocol that we developed for generating functional immune cells or dendritic cells from individual derived iPSCs. On the left-hand side is iPSC APC. On the right-hand side is blood-derived APC. And since one of the key feature of antigen-presenting cells is phagocytosis, so we use these beads which were labeled with a fluorescent tag, and then we showed that both the cells were nicely phagocytizing. So we confirm their phagocytic ability and also antigen presentation. Now, where the field stands and what are the challenges, and then I'll come to the carrier options, like which will be of interest to you guys. So there are some features like embryonic stem cells, whether you can generate embryonic stem cells, and then if you are taking embryo from the IVF clinic, and that embryo has a potential to live while you want to destroy it. So that is the ethical dilemma in there. And that's why like it is not means allowed to generate more HESC lines anymore, because there are plenty, and now APSC technology is there. And whether it's animal studies or whether it's human embryonic stem cell research studies, these regulatory guidelines have developed, and they follow all these 3R, whereby you have to refine your procedure, you have to replace whether you can do it without embryo or without animal, or if you cannot do it without that, then you have to reduce that. So this is exactly the same. Now, ethical challenges, if you don't have a regulatory issues or oversight, then anybody can create human clones. Some country can create army of means designer means military, and that will create a problem and all those things. So there are some issues like you have to check the pluripotency profile, and then you have to check the means genome stability, and then you will have to derive these xeno-free culture conditions, because if you are using animal products in the culture, they get absorbed into the cells, and that can result in immunogenicity. And there are some regulatory hurdles. So the field is moving fast in terms of developing protocols to derive different somatic cells from iPSCs. And there are clinical trials also, like at least for age-related macular degeneration. And they have shown some promise there, but there are challenges also in there. So about the immunogenicity, like this is our published work where we showed that if you take human dendritic cells, convert it into iPSCs, so these cells lose their innate and adaptive pathway mechanisms in there. So we showed that these are not inherently immunogenic. So it all depends like how your cells are being derived, which cell particular population is, and how do you then check the quality and the other features before you move for therapeutic applications. So now this is, I think, most interesting part, which is for the students. What are the career perspectives? So as you have seen, so far with the different speakers also, you can choose industry and you can choose academia. So in the industry, like you have a scientist position, which I think Prabhu will be talking a little bit more in detail, like in a bit. So you have junior scientist entry level at undergrad level or a senior master's level. Some of the speakers were criticizing or like highlighting, rather not criticizing, but like pointing it out that students are not well trained, or they don't have the job skills or something. So there is a need in the country to have these programs which provide students not only the fundamental knowledge, but also technical skills associated with it. So this was one of the driving force why when I came back to the country, we started this undergrad and master's program in molecular medicine and stem cell technology at AUH. And our second batches are running. And very pleased, like this will turn out some of the good students in there. Now, if you want to talk about academic route, so academia, you go for the research fellow and then a postdoctoral fellow. And after postdoctoral fellowship, you can go for academic positions, as has been my route and so many other speakers' route in there. And but this is not just earlier it used to be considered these are the two routes only, but now like whether you can become a scientist or whether you can become a academic faculty or something like that, but there are other alternative career options that are appearing on the horizon. So all the companies which are doing drug development or something, they need medical writers who will write the reports or write the manuscripts or write the regulatory documents for drug filing. So there is a field which is emerging of a medical writer or regulatory writer. So students who don't want to go in a hardcore research, they can choose this. Then science advocacy policy advisor positions are there. So students can also target that. And there are another very interesting career option which is available these days, and which is a high paying also, of intellectual property rights experts and all those things. So what are these intellectual property, and what these people do? So essentially, like any company who have developed any drug or who have developed any therapeutics, they want a have a monopoly, or rather protect their invention. So they do it by filing a particular patent. But patent is like you have created something new which is not pre-existing, and then this has an industrial application. So there are certain features that a particular invention has to qualify to become a successful patent. So you need patent attorneys to file these. But like if you are going on a highway, you see a McDonald's sign, you can recognize that is a McDonald's. So, but what is this intellectual property in there? That is known as trademark. So all these companies, like whether it's a Honda car or a Hyundai car or a Tata car, so they have their own trademark, which is you can recognize a car, whether which make it is, and they protect this by their intellectual property, and that comes under trademarks. And then you are reading different books, you are listening to different songs, and those creators of those books and the songs want to create their intellectual or brain derived property, so that comes under copyright. And then we are using these computers and all those things, and so there are some IC layouts, so that is protected against industrial design, or like other machines can be protected against industrial design. And then if we talk about like there are Banarsi sari or like Assam tea, so these things have specific quality associated with that particular region, and there is a means recognition of that also, that comes under geographical indication. So there is a wide scope of this intellectual property out there, and people who process the filing of these IP and IPR rights, that are known as intellectual patent agents. So there is a good paying jobs out there, and people can choose it. You complete this basic degree in your biotechnology or something, and then you can clear patent agent exam, and then you qualify to become that. So in summary, the career opportunities in biotechnology and human health, molecular medicine or stem cell or any other allied area, they are immense. It is up to the students to decide how much skill set they want to acquire in research area of your interest. So somebody asked like, which is a high paying area? But if you are going in a high paying area, if you are not enjoying the job, it will be a burden. So you choose an area which interests you, and then you go in that area. And whether they want to opt for hardcore research position or academic position or science advisor position, that's up to you. And government is also now emphasizing to nurture startup culture. So you can even become job creators rather than job seekers. So there is a bright future awaiting you, but it is up to you how much you want to harness it.